All right, welcome everybody to another live We Up report. I'm your host, Mr. Blows Your Minds, and today's show is going to be based on something that done already happened. Some of y'all already know what it is, but was there more to this story on both ends? One we're going to talk about as a thumbnail show you, Mike Vick's Last Dog. Right? They had a story out with Mike Vick's last dog. And then there's the story about, for those who didn't know about, the $26.25 million that was given to those of the Flint water crisis. But to hear the story in its entirety, you're going to have to stay tuned. So let's go ahead and let's get into this. Let's get it.
Portions of the following program may be unsuitable for younger or more sensitive viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
Disclaimer. Copyright disclaimer under Section 107 of the Copyright Act of 1976. Allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news, reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Fair use is a use permitted by copyright statute that might otherwise be infringing. Non-profit education or personal use tips the balance in favor of fair use. This video was made for entertainment purposes and is transformative in nature. Hey, how's y'all doing, everybody? Again, this is your host, the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. This is Mr. Blows Your Minds, and welcome to We Up Report. First and foremost, I want to say what's good to the fam that should happen to be in the house. I know I don't come on as recent as I should. We've been working on that, and we promise for 2022 to be more on the daily. So for those who should catch the show live, we want to thank each and every one of you for coming by. Don't forget to hit that like, dislike, subscribe, unsubscribe, whatever you got to do. Do what you got to do. But we thank you for kindly coming over here. Passing by, you happen to pass by. This is the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. Happen to go down the aisle, see something to make you feel some kind of way. Remember, the motto of my show is the truth. Don't need no partner. Now, today's show is going to be based on, as you've seen in that thumbnail, as I kind of went over a little bit in the intro there. Recently, not too long ago, less than a week ago, they talked about Mike Vick and the last dog, right? I mean, what is the implications of them making a story? I know it's not like something that is trending. I know a lot of people kind of just went over their heads, but why do you think that Mike Vick has to be demonized or had been demonized in the way that he was, so that it looks like that even as he did everything that was needed to rectify his situation and make amends, right as this last dog dies, and again, we're not against animals, but we have to look at what was the reason for making even, you're going to have to see this be going, right? You're going to see this be going. So anyway, why did they need to do that? We're going to look at, and then the fact of being, again, about Detroit water, the crisis that happened in Detroit. But we're going to find out there's other places other than Detroit that this has happened. But they did get a partial settlement for some of the claimants, primarily more of the children. And to get $626.25 million, is that enough money for, when you're talking about lead, and you're talking about all the things that come with the side effects, the illnesses, and the prolonged things that will happen as time go on? When you find out how many people are a part of this settlement and look at the money, then probably you'll know why at least somebody in the corner wanted to bring some attention to it, other than the fact that they did put it out there, but because of so many things happening, a lot of people didn't catch it. So what we do is WeUpReport. We always go out and we find certain things. So let's go ahead and let's get into this. Let's get into this Mike Vicks situation first, and then we'll do the Detroit second. So check this out, and we should be right back. All right, so we're going to get into this next story that I got over here. Some of y'all heard this. I really think that this story in itself is not really of a news breaking story, but I think there's always a teaching moment. There's always something we can look at inside of the story and for future references. And what was the real true significance of the story like this in the first place? What you talking about, Mr. Blows Your Mind? Maybe y'all seen this. All right, did y'all see that? The article that came out talking about Mike Vick and just talking about how last dog to survive, NFL player Mike Vick's dogfighting ring dies. Let me say that one more again. Last dog to survive, NFL player Michael Vick's dogfighting ring dies, right? Can you believe that they actually made an article on this? Matter of fact, if I'm not mistaken, it was in the People's magazine that I had seen this, right? And then I seen another heading of it was saying something like this. Last dog rescued from Mike Vick's massive dog fighting operation in 2007 has died. Say that again. The last dog rescued from Mike Vick's massive dog fighting operation in 2007 has died. You would think that they were talking about somebody who was a serial killer, right? Think about that. Massive dog fighting operation. Now, again, I love animals. Have had some dogs in my life. Understand and sometimes watch videos where dogs do some of the darndest things. And when we go back and look at this whole ordeal about what took place with Michael Vick, the question becomes, what was it truly about? Now, again, I understand an operation, as they say, that is doing with dog fighting, especially when we talk about specific people being animal lovers. I'm going to show you something that animals are actually a little higher than animals. Then you have to understand history and the correlation of things, and let me tie that in a little later. But the fact is, animals are not really animals. They are really like humans. Let me say that again. Animals are not animals in the court of law and can be elevated to the status of non-human. Okay, really? So when you looked at this story about Mike Vick, once again, they making him like a reference if you talk about serial killers, right? You think about serial killers, talking about the David Berkowitz, talking about the Boston Strangler, Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, the Zodiac Killer. You might as well put Mike Vick's face there as the poster because he was kind of like a serial killer, but it's with dogs. But again, dogs and the way they got the mantra of man best friend and him being a lower level than him, then you know how they looked at us. So obviously as black people, you are actually lower some of these animals that are out here, but you just haven't figured that out yet, right? We're going to get into all that, right? Now, the article that I had seen was talking about how the news was confirming that one of the dogs' name that they called him Frodo, right? Frodo, he was a pit bull. And they said that Frodo was about 15 years old. And he had passed on Friday or on Saturday. He transitioned. Now the day being Saturday, right? Today Saturday? And today is Saturday, right? So that was last week Saturday. So the day being the 25th, so we'd say about 7 days ago, about the 18th. And so they talked about how he was really the last of the dogs from that group. Now, so they actually went out there and it's kind of like, well, we'll get into that. But anyway, so there was a Facebook post, and it came from the animal welfare nonprofit called Bad Rap, and it was giving an explanation about Frodo and talking about how he was the last of the 48, what they said, brave survivors from the game-changing case. The game-changing case, a case that they put Michael Vick through, made some strides into the, I guess, PETA world, right? The pet world, right? Where this face of Mike Vick to animals would have been kind of like when we talk about, again, those serial killers. See, Mike Vick, you better run and call this hotline number. So, Vick, who's now 41 years old, and they talked about how he spent 18 months in federal prison for the whole ordeal, right? And they also showed a picture of the dog. Let me show you what the dog, right? They even gave a picture of the dog, right? The old Frodo there, right? 15 years old. So if we go back, what's that, 15 years from now? About 2007, maybe he didn't even go through the ordeal, right? He didn't go through the ordeal. And matter of fact, when you think about dog years, with him being 15 years old, now they say for every 1 human year is equivalent to 7 years of man or human, right? Let me say that again. For every 1 year of a human, it's about equivalent to 7 years in dog years. So if you do 7 times 15, Frodo, the old dog, you see in his face there, he's pretty old. But they are attaching him as he was probably a pup of the operation and lived out. And then they are actually doing an expose of his life and those other ones as we get in. Again, we have to get into why did they get into, if what I'm going to show you, when you're talking about rehabilitated and somebody, again, 18 months in federal prison, comes out, he has to be a changed man. He has to repent. That's what penitentiary is pent, coming from the church, repentance, penitentiary, right? So he has to show after this ordeal and it was big news at the time for those who were around. And what was the true significance of really using this to actually blight him, to blacklist him, to blackball him, to make him out to be this villain? Because in this article, it talked about how this was the incredible Vick dog era, and now it's come to be over by the death of Frodo. Okay? And so they gave kind of a eulogy for Frodo, right? They said, we had the great honor and privilege of attending the transition of the sweet, shy Frodo as his family helped him pass over to be with the rest of the dogs from the group. So, the origin of dog fighting goes back in this country to about 1830. It was, again, knowing that we as Black Americans in this country and where we were at this particular time, but we're just going to say that who were the original people doing dog fighting? So again, I did a video back in some time back talking about a learned association. And many of the things that we've learned in this country have come from our association by people by, again, it's like what we say, right? And what we do. And we imitate because these are the things that are inculcated through the educational systems and by our experiences. So I'm not trying to make light of the fact that they did dog fighting, but again, it was an old American tradition that faded out. And, I don't know how much on hand did Mike Vick have with the operation. We know it might have been on property, may have been some of his fundings, part of it and so forth, and family members and so forth. But how much on hand was he and to actually had the dogs do it? Well, we don't know. But we do know that Mike Vick at the time, being in the NFL at that time and having the impact, right? Becoming an impact player. And as those who might have seen my video about the bad man and the archetype of the bad man, maybe Mike Vick fell in this, and this was a way to really get at him. So let me go on more to what they talked about. And so they go on and eulogize some more, not just on Frodo, but they actually went in about the last 48. They say brave survivors. Now, wait a minute, brave survivors, right? Again, look at the terminology being used here, right? Matter of fact, let me show you some, just in case you think these are my own words. So it says he was the last of 48 brave survivors from that game-changing case, seized and rescued in 2007. We estimate that he would have been 15 years old. This is the important part. The last 14 years of his life was spent being pampered like a prince with the Ramirez family and dogs. Sweet Frodo, how we loved him. He was one of the bravest survivors we ever met. Huh? Right? You would think that this would be utilizing of a person. Now again, I know that pets can become family members, right? But I'm going to show you something as we go more into this that, sometimes you don't understand the game. And when we're talking about legal systems and people being elevated to a status that is above the average black man or woman, and when you understand what this status game is all about, you will see why they went all out. And really, when you see that how Mike Vick, after going through that whole ordeal, some of the things they had him to go out there to go against people who they felt was maybe not to their liking, and they said put a hot mic in front of his face and let him say some of the things that need to be said. And I'll play some of these videos for you, right? So they go on, they talk about, we didn't realize at the time that Johnny Justice had just passed away. Now, Johnny Justice must have been another one of the, again, 48 victims that was part of this so-called dog fighting empire. And he passed away. And they were talking about how his private moments with his people, they give the names of the people. And 2 days earlier, they had said, they're talking about, we thought that Johnny would live forever. Now, wait a minute. Is this really legitimate? They really said, well, we thought the dog was going to live forever. Everything has an expiration date, right? Everything expires. So why embellish on this story more than need to be? We understand the loss of the dog. Again, these dogs seem to be on the higher end of dog's life when you think about it, to say 15 years later and still had been around. So when you say they survived, maybe they were just born of the dogs that were, who protect of that time, who might have been older, who were fighting dogs, but these might have been the puppies. Why are this over dramatics? Why you over dramatization of these stories and trying to, really put the screws in the coffin? Remember, Mike Vick done already did his time. He done advocated for. He's actually done everything that y'all want him to do. But it seems let's get a little bit more. Let's squeeze a little bit more juice out of this damn turnip, right? So then they go on to talk about the final week of October. They're talking about Little D Little, sweet man. They call him Yuba. He passed over. They said they've been grappling with the words to find, and now Yuba's friends have pushed that door wide open, right? So they got this whole. I mean, it's really, for going back, animal was an animal. You have affection for your dog. You name your dog. You have camaraderie with your dog. You become family member, but it seemed like they done elevated animals to, again, personhood. And in personhood, they're almost equivalent. And in some cases, some of them can be seen in the status to be above certain people. So you may be like, Mr. Blow, man, you really pushing that, right? You really pushing that. Am I really pushing that? You think I'm bullying, right? Y'all really think I'm bullying, right? So let me go ahead and show you something here, right? Let me also show you this. You ever notice sometimes, have you ever watched like a sitcom show? Let's say the Cosby Show, let's say Good Times, let's say Family Matters, let's say That's My Mama or What's Happening Now. Yeah, I know these some of the old shows, but just for reference here. And they always say, where are they now? Right? Well, let me show you what they showed here. Let's check this out. Look at this. Michael Vick's dog fighting survivors. Where are they now? What? Mike Vick's dog fighting survivors. Where are they now? Right? Just like they do those old shows. Where are they now? Where is Thelma today? Right? And so forth and so on. Right? So here they go into it. So what is the big thing? And why did they felt the need that they need to put some more screws into Mike Vick, right? Was Mike Vick doing something that was actually threatening? Was Mike Vick's existence in the NFL doing any, let's say, seed? I'm going to put it like this. I think the Creator make certain people who become seeds, right? Certain seeds, when you look at this system of things, and those who feel like, if you're not under their command, their standard, the way they look at everything, that the seed that you might be planting might not be what they say beneficial for them. So certain seeds that are, let's say like Terminator seeds, these seeds, they do not want to sprout. They do not want to water it. They don't want to nourish it. They don't want to put it in good soil. What they want to do is really kind of like GMO it. They want to take it. They want to alter it. They want it to sprout in a certain way that would be beneficial for them who are planting. And I think that's what they did when it comes to Mike Vick. And I'll get a little bit more into that, right? And it's just ironic when you look at this. They talk about how back in 2007 when they raided the Vicks compound and they found the 49 pit bulls. A lot of them were malnourished, injured, a chain of old cars and axes of wood. And that was in Surrey, Virginia, they said, right? And they said there were also remains of dozens of dogs who've been killed, all part of vicious dog fighting. So they put a big expo on this whole thing. Now, again, like I said, I'm not a animal hater. I had dogs in my life. And I understand the camaraderie of companionship that animals, especially when we talk about dogs, they bring to, families and life and so forth. I'm not sitting here trying to make it like, well, that, but I'm just saying how they went all out. They're going all out to make sure that and, revere and demonize at the same time. So they talked about how the federal judge had sentenced Mike Vick when he was 27 back then. So he's 41 now. So he's 41 now, 27 years. So we're going to say about 14 years ago. And for those who don't know, he was the quarterback of the Atlanta Falcons. Okay, now that right there in itself is something that I want to stress on. What is probably the real reason why they did so much to stigmatize, label him, defame his character, and make him the poster, again, as a serial killer, but not with humans, but with a non-human person. He became that. And him being a quarterback at that time, and for those who were around to see the magnificence and God-given abilities that Mike Vick had as an NFL quarterback, and I talked about earlier about making seeds, he was going to be a seed planter. Let me say that again. Mike Vick was going to be a seed planter, because all those quarterbacks that came after him, and if you were a little one at that time, the images, the iconicness, if that's a word, being an icon that he represented, and to be idolized, that means that millions of young boys around this globe or around this United States were going to imitate Mike Vick. And this would be threatening to the, let's go, if we're gonna keep this 100, when we talk about the quarterback position in the NFL, that is one of the positions that they tried to keep as sacred to the establishment as possible. Let me say that one more again. When we talk about the quarterback position in the NFL, the one position that seems to try to stand, as they say, these people that call themselves conservative, the one thing they try to conserve in the NFL, the position of a quarterback, to be a certain hue, from a certain background, because it has the aura of intelligence, IQ, leadership. So when Mike Vick came in, doing the damage that he did that no other quarterback had done before him, he was breaking the mold and creating a mold at the same time. That means, as I said earlier, that little ones who were observing and watching Michael Vick were all going to try to be Mike Vick type of quarterbacks, which means that the standard pocket passer and those who did that were about to be going obsolete if Mike Vick does not get interrupted. Let me say that one more again. The prototype of Mike Vick planting them seeds of the young icons that was out there that was observing and looking at him, if Mike Vick does not get interrupted and do the things that he's doing, the conservative of the white position as quarterback was going to be threatened. It had already been threatened, right? When you go back and you look at some of the quarterbacks that had been in the NFL, going back to say, let's say, you say Doug Williams being the first one to win a championship, right? You had Warren Moon, Dante Culpepper. You even got, Cordell Stewart, Randall Cunningham. You had Bears had a brother named Vince Evans back in the days. Those who know about Vince Evans, man, had a shotgun back there, but they would never let that, and he could run. but they would never let that brother start in that position, right? You had Vince Young, that was really another archetype that was coming off the Mike Vick season 2, right? Think about that. From Culpepper, then you had Donovan McNabb and things like that. So you were seeing these prototypes that were being there, but Mike Vick brought another element that could run. And the quarterback was, in his case, he could run 80, 90 yards in the game, right? So that was very threatening because, like I said, look at all the quarterbacks that came following that. So, again, they had to interrupt that. Here was a situation that was merited, but it was also maybe used in a way to defame, to blacklist, and to break this individual. Again, if you didn't see my movie again with Jack Johnson, and go through there and see what type of individual Jack Johnson was. So a lot of people just only see the fact that he was with white women. But there was another thing about Jack Johnson, that he was the prototype, that he was the bad man type, or they say bad nigger. And when you go in and understand that, then you can see that every time a bad man or a bad nigger gets in these positions, it is the SOS call to go out and do everything possible to, eradicate this, right? So we see that he got about 23 months in prison. He was fined. They said nearly $1 million. He gave the victims restitution and the lifetime care and rehabilitation of the 47 surviving dogs. I did not know that. Did you? Say that one more again. Did you know that he got 23 months in prison? He was fined nearly $1 million for victims' restitution. And on top of that, he had to give lifetime care and rehabilitation of the 47 survivor dogs. Well, they said 2 of them eventually got put down. But of the 23 months that he was sentenced, he only served 18 months. So he took on, what's that, about 5 months off? Right? Okay. So again, he was threatening something. There was something he was threatening. Now, I want you to see this, right? I want you to see. Let's switch over here. And for those who know, you need to see that. Saying if you would like to contribute to the show in any way, you can do by those things right there. And others who have, somehow it went back to you. Well, I thank you for your efforts. I thank you for your efforts. But if you were serious about it, you do what you have to do, right? Let's see. Do we have that? I don't know if we had that. Let's see. Do we have that? Because I want to show y'all something here. I want to show you something here. I want to show you that. Let's see. Do we got that? Because we should have that. Because remember I told you that dogs can actually get into, that level of I want to see. I'm trying to find out where is that at. We need to see that. Let's see. You need to see that, because without that, then it's kind of like I'm just talking. I want you to see this because I want you to make sense of this, right? So you see what they went all out on him with, right? See if you can pull that picture up. Need that picture up there. Show that. And go ahead and show that, and then we'll get into that. All right, so I want y'all to see this. Remember I told you about animals can be elevated in this system to be granted, they say, personhood. He's telling a lie, Mr. Mrblowsurmind. Well, check this out. Okay? Sandra, the orangutan, freed from a zoo after being granted personhood, settles into her new home. Hey, you sitting here watching the video. Why you sitting there? Put your hand on that like button, click it, thumbs it up, share this video, comment. You can like or dislike it. We don't care about that. And also, if you ain't over here and subscribe, what you waiting on? Get yourself on there and subscribe to get on up to We Up Report so you can stay up because we're going to keep you up. That's how you help keep this channel going. You can also do some monetary donations. We'll tell you about that later. But right now, wake yourself up, like, share, and comment. And don't forget, when you subscribe on that button, hit that put all notifications. You know how YouTube get down. Let me say that one more again. Sandra, the orangutan, freed from a zoo after being granted personhood, settles into her new home. Okay? What you see on your screen there, for me, that is an orangutan. But that's not no regular orangutan. This orangutan here went to court and was granted legal personhood. Now, this is a 33-year-old orangutan, and the judge was in Argentina, I think it was. Yeah, I think it was in Argentina, right? I think the judge's name was Elena Liberatori, right? And they called this a landmark ruling in 2015. Now, remember, in 2007, when all this is taking place with Mike Vick and the so-called operation that he was doing, and again, the nefarious serial killer Mike Vick is the way they demonizing this. This had not been part of it. So these were just regular dogs at this time. But because they done lived to be past 2015, after this so-called landmark case, or this landmark ruling that they did for this Sandra the orangutan, she was declared legally not an animal. I'll say that one more again. The orangutan that you see on your screen there, back in 2015, by a landmark case that was going back in Argentina, granted Sandra the orangutan personhood. But they say a non-human person, thus entitled to some legal rights enjoyed by people and better living conditions. Ain't that something? Black folks in the United States been fighting all this time to get to about 53 years ago, or a little more, maybe 55, about 55, 56 years ago, just to get civil rights. It took same amount of time for Sandra the orangutan, which is 33, to have gotten, this is back in 2000, I think, about 2018. So that's already been about 3 years ago. And Sandra was 33 at that time, right? So Sandra got her rights quicker than black folks who went through Reconstruction, Civil Rights era. Sandra the orangutan got her, again, she got some legal rights enjoyed by people. Sound like the same thing equivalent to when you talk about black Americans in this country and what we've been going through this whole time. But Sandra had the right attorneys, I guess, right? And obviously they decided, well, it was doable. We could do this. Right? We could actually do this, right? They actually did it, right? So they said with the ruling, this judge wanted to tell society something new. What you want to tell the society something new? You mean an animal ain't an animal? An animal can actually be elevated from animal to another status. Really? Oh, I actually understand that, even from a human standpoint, right? You know that there is a status game played worldwide that it's a standard of civilization, as I talked about in the video for those who might have seen it, the one that I told you about, how those sisters were going against the standard of civilization and they were getting demonized for going against it. So to validate what I was talking about back then, you can see a person, which is an animal, is a much lower status. Well, you even say sometimes a black man is a beast. And in fact, you even go in that Black Laws Dictionary, you find out that a creature was also considered to be a person as well, right? So we see that Sandra the orangutan got elevated from a animal status to a non-human but person status, right? And so the judge wanted to send out a signal to society and saying that this is something new and that animals are sentient beings. Sentient, right? This was the first right they have is, they say, our obligation to respect them. Wait a minute. The first right they have, meaning animals, is our obligation to respect them. Well, let's put it this way. When we go back historically here in the United States, and black people were considered 3/5 of a human being, which means you're not even quite considered in our eyes as equivalent as man or human to us, which means you are an animal, which means that if you go by the way that they were talking about with the Sandra the orangutan, that the first that they had as obligations to an animal is to respect them. So that means somebody has been breaking the law all this time, right or wrong, right? Okay. They also talked about another case in New York where they talk about an elephant. Now, you haven't heard this, right? When I see an elephant fly, well, right? But they was talking about in New York where they said they had lawyers arguing in a case that was about this particular elephant. They said that this elephant had been detained by the Bronx Zoo illegally. Wait, let me say this again. There was also an elephant in New York that lawyers were arguing the case in court that this elephant named Happy, and that Happy was being detained in a Bronx Zoo illegally. And they said due to her personhood and must be released. I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up, right? Huh? I'm not making this up. You might think I'm making this up. You can go see with your own eyes. It's there. It's there, right? So, wait a minute, Mr. Mrblowsurmind. What are you trying to say here? What I'm trying to tell you is this. What you trying to tell me, Mr. Mrblowsurmind? What I'm trying to tell you is they use this situation here with Mike Vick is because, well, this wasn't just animals. It wasn't just dogs. These dogs were, these dogs was on a level that was, equivalent, right? To almost a human. They have some characteristics. They have intelligence, right? They're not animals, and they can be legally elevated to a status that many of us, matter of fact, if you think that somebody who's locked in a jail, an animal of this nature with this status has more rights than you locked up in a jail cell. Huh? Oh, yeah, this is what we live at, right? So when you see that last dog to survive NFL player Mike Vick dogfight in the ring dies, that's what they're talking about. It ain't just the fact that the dogs, it was 48 and they're talking about these were peoples. And he was out there doing this to these peoples. Ain't that something? Right? So I'm going to elaborate a little bit more about this whole thing with Mike Vick and how I looked at it being this bad man seed type. And how really when you look at it, I want you to hear some of the things that after Mike Vick did all that advocating, came, ostracized and all this stuff. After he went through all that, then they used him for a situation with the Colin Kaepernick. Now, I'm not telling you that, everything 100 about the Colin Kaepernick that I'm agreeing to and so forth, but I'm just saying that the stance that he took and what ended up creating a tidal wave that caused a ripple in the country. And just listen to how when they get you in this situation like Mike Vick, and when they put the hot mic and the camera on you to show your allegiance and to show that you are resentful or remorseful for the things you have done, we don't got to give you a script. You're going to stick to the script. And just listen to Mike Vick. I like Mike Vick. Again, he was a seed. And his seed was to fruition young ones to look at him and to play the quarterback position from his perspective or his way and everything, and to elevate it beyond that. But what was it going to threaten? So let's listen to some of the things that Mike Vick said, and we're going to elaborate a little bit more. Check this out.
I think he really does. The first thing we got to get Colin to do is cut his hair. You know, I mean, listen, I'm not up here to try to be politically correct, but, you know, even if he puts cornrows in it, I don't think he should represent himself, you know, in that way in terms of, you know, just the hairstyle. Just go clean cut. You know, why not? You know, you're already dealing with a lot of controversy surrounding this issue.
All right, so we are back, right? And so, as I elaborated on that story about Mike Vick and the story about the last dog, as I laid out everything that article was talking about, and then show you the correlations as to why would they be making the story pertaining to the life. It's like a lifetime story about the dogs. That, again, I'm not saying that being a hater of dogs, but the thing is, they made this as it was like equivalent to a person. And so the things that I believe that Mike Vick was threatening at the time of him being in his heyday, being at that time, and what he was threatening, this seemed to be the break the glass case of emergency, a reason to use to get at him. Now, is he right for what he had done? No. But we've seen other NFL players, especially being white persuasion, being in similar situations, not like with the dogs, but even worse, where there's been allegations of them sexual conduct and rapes and stuff like that, but never get pulled and put out and posterized as they did Mike Vick. So after he did all that to try to make amends of what he had did, to come with a story like this and still to keep poking the hot iron at him, you still have to remember, for those who was at that time, what Mike Vick was doing and what he meant at that time. So when you go through the ringer with them and you still want to be a part of their association, fraternization, and to be accepted, you still have to stay on code against your own code. Let me say that again. You still, after trying to get back to be accepted, part of the association, fraternization, and acceptance, you have to still be on that code against your own code. Now, the things that they had a hot mic on him was during the time of the Colin Kaepernick. And everybody, those who remember, matter of fact, I made a video called A Country with a Two-Sided Flag, and they removed that video. Now, you got to remember, this channel doesn't even get 100 views. I've been on basically 10 years, but I can't get 100 views. But I've had several of my videos not being flagged, but just being removed because of the content. Because there's a lot of people who will see my videos and think that my videos, I'm just rambling, talking, and so forth. Yeah, it may sound like that to you, but if you really get the gist and understanding of where I'm coming from, then you might understand why this channel is considered the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. So we just seen Mike Vick, and they're talking about Colin Kaepernick at that time. And as you heard him say, he talks about the first thing he needs to do is cut him hair. That's what I said, him hair. He talking about Colin Kaepernick. The first thing he needs to do is cut him hair because he needs to have a certain image. Now, think about this. Why is it that it's always the image of what is natural for black people, African people, people of color, right? Black people. Why you have to make laws about making your hair to be legally kept the way that is natural for you? Why did they? I think about it. Every state now is somewhat passing, in January being the time where they start passing a lot of laws. You probably can go do some research, and what you're going to see is a lot of states are now implementing these hair laws that black people can now wear their hair. according to the way it grows for people who are black. Why do you need a law for something that is natural? What is it about you that's always never in compliance? What is it about you that's always seemed to be not quite just to our liking? And if you wear it in such a way, it's threatening, it's non-compliant, it is against the status quo. And so here is a black man who is talking about another man who is considered to be black and who is taking a stance about some things that he felt was worthy of making mention. So here's one who's been through the ringer, gone to jail, had to advocate, and as you heard some of the things, restitution for the rest of their life and $1 million fines and so forth. He had to make sure that if he wants to be a part of this association, fraternization, and everything else, we don't even have to give a brother like that a script. He already script for us. So what does he do? Exactly as you just heard him say. Now, again, I love Mike Vick in the way he played, right? And again, as I said, a seed, being an icon that was going to sprinkle his gift, his spirit, through them ethers on that TV, and young black people were going to idolize and was going to revolution and change the quarterback position. This is the threat he was. And many people I see let this story kind of go up under the radar because a lot of people don't have that discernment. They just see, oh, the dog and so forth. But you got to remember that time, because let me give you a little bit more, because when you go back and you remember after he had did all that, did his 18 months and came back and then got back, remember his team that he came back in, went, then it was a game from the Super Bowl. A lot of people don't forget. He was a game away from the damn Super Bowl. And I have never in my life ever seen a cancellation of a football game. Do any of y'all remember? Now, I'm not saying because there may be some women here. I'm not talking about Mr. Mrblowsurmind. I'm just saying for those who might know. It snowed, right? Remember, it snowed so bad that they canceled the game. And Vic was on a little street, and this team was one game away from getting back to the Super Bowl. You know, that's kind of like if you go back, remember when the Beast was on the 2-3 yard line, and after all that stance he had took, and then everybody that watched the Super Bowl knew he was going to get the handoff. But what did they call? They called a pass play and threw a damn interception so that why? He wouldn't even get the ball because they did not want him to get that to be the hero. And then how many seeds would the Beast have planted by him being that hero? So a lot of people are not understanding the magnitude of what Mike Vick was at that time. He was threatening the sacredcy of the white quarterback position. A lot of y'all didn't understand that. So now after he done went through the ringer trying to stay in and be, again, associated with it, they all they got to do now, they don't need to write a script for him. He's already got that script done. And you just heard him say that. Now listen to some of the other stuff that he said also in this. Listen to this.
Look, so all the social media stuff that he's doing, look, we get it, we understand it. It's time for, Collins to step up in a different way. And, I think primarily the reason why he's not signed to a team right now is because of the last 2 seasons and not being as productive as everybody.
Right? So here he is talking about Collins and saying that the reason why he's not playing had nothing to do with his stance. It's more about him not playing well. Now, again, statistically and looking at that, there is some merit to that. I'll give him that. But we know, many of us already know, what was the true reason why he wasn't playing. Well, just in case if he might have forgot, let me show you, just in case everybody forgot. Do you not, you remember this?
Luther and I, and everyone in this arena tonight, are unified by the same great American values. We're proud of our country. We respect our flag. Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now, out, he's fired. He's fired.
Hey, you sitting here watching the video. Why you sitting there? Put your hand on that like button, click it, thumbs it up, share this video, comment. You can like or dislike it. We don't care about that. And also, if you ain't over here and subscribe, what you waiting on? Get yourself over there and subscribe to get on up to We Up Report so you can stay up because we going to keep you up. That's how you help keep this channel going. You can also do some monetary donations. We'll tell you about that later. But right now, wake yourself up, like, share, and comment. And don't forget, when you subscribe on that button, hit that put all notifications. You know how YouTube get down. All right. So everybody remember that. Everybody remember when President Donald Trump went out there and said what he said, right? So again, I ain't got no gripe with Mike Vick. Man's got to do what that man's got to do. But what I'm saying is you can see through the ringer and ordeal that he went through that he was going to stay on script, on code, not on code for his own, but on code for them that he's trying to, again, either be memorialized, which a lot of brothers that play football, that is the highlight of the end of their career, is to be enshrined in the Hall of Fame, where they believe to be living forever and forever. But the question you got to ask yourself, to be enshrined in something, to live forever, means that you don't want no change as to all the things that ever been happening to your people and the history that is entailed. Do I need to say that again? Right? But I'm not going to say it again. But again, he talks about how technically he just saying that people are telling him that, Colin needs to change. He needs to change his image in order to be accepted. Again, as I asked you earlier, why is it everything that has to do with you and your naturalness is always abhorrence? It's always distasteful. It's always non-compliant when you do what is natural for you as a black person. So here, as another black man who is talking about another half black man, right? We're there, half black man, and who's trying to make a stance about something that there's a lot of people who debate whether to say was it his legitimacy about his stance or not is another thing. But the point is, he was doing what he was doing, and they always go in the back room and pull out the one that's going to always come out. Like you got Herschel Walker doing what he doing, right? And they come out and they speak in advocacy against their own. Now listen to another part of that conversation. Check this out.
We got Michael Vick here, who had to struggle getting back into the NFL. You had an image problem.
Yeah.
And you were a guy that wore cornrows, wore the gold chains, played the whole hip-hop
had an
image.
afro at times, even during the tough times. It was something that people would whisper in my ear. This is the way you're being perceived. But that wasn't me as a person.
You heard him asked by Black Cramden there, right? I'm calling Black Cramden. But anyway, Jason Whitlock, right? And he says that people were coming to him, asking him when he was wearing the gold chain, wearing the hair, the afro, the cornrows. Think about this. Football players are not really recognized. They're only known by their jersey unless they are being highly commercialized where you get to know them from a personal image. Basketball players are different. Baseball players have a similar, but basketball players are primarily more recognizable because they don't have all that is things that are, obscuring their image, right? So football players are known for their jerseys. They are, and those who are all avid and fans of it, they know they play when they see them. So to have afro and cornrows would pretty much be not during the game, or would probably be noticeable if an interview you're doing it and so forth. Gold chain, I don't think you would see that. So why make these reference to things that maybe be outside after you done played? And you know, a lot of jobs act like they own your ass even after your ass off the clock. Let me say that again. A lot of jobs act like they own your ass when you punch the clock, when you off the clock. You say you still represent the job. So it's like you always an employee even when you're not. It's kind of like how police say even they off job, they still a cop, right? So whether, no matter what kind of job you do, it's the same way. But my thing is, when they talk to this, to have him to critique his own self about how he had to struggle and how people coming and whispering in his ear and telling him about his image. The black man's image, black people's image is always seen to be not quite in accordance. Always needing some kind of critique. You always need to tweak it. You need to get to the certain type of specifications, all that good stuff, right? And so here is a black man saying this about his own damn self to be in collaboration with the panel, talking about somebody else who's trying to make a stance about something that he should be in acceptance, but because of his ordeal and what he went through, he cannot. See, this is what happens when a lot of brothers, you get in these situations because it look like they're trying to get LeBron at this time too. Now, I don't normally talk about sports, but I'm talking about this in particular because of this story that they put out, right? And so that's what happens. To stay in accordance, to stay in compliance, when they no longer, again, like chewing gum. You ever chew some damn gum and it done lost its damn taste? You take it, you discard it, get you a new piece. Well, if you want that same old flavor from that gum and want to keep it chewing a little bit longer, you got to come up with some more sweet, which means you need to stay in compliance. And you see it time and time again. But when it comes to one of them, when it comes to the white guy, just like who's the quarterback that's faked and lied and said that he took the what they call the sugar, right? But he lied about it. But because Kyrie, he got overwhelmed. We ain't gonna talk about that no more, right? So it's just funny how that works. So let me show a little bit more of some of the stuff he said going into this.
Dan Collin, you know, he's a great kid.
Yeah, he is.
He is a great kid. And the reason he's not playing, it has nothing to do with, you know, the national anthem. I think it's more solely on his play. But yeah, I mean, everything takes precedent, you know, in terms of image, perception. You know, you got to clean it up. You got to make sure you do it all right.
Now, again, your image, your perception has to be in compliance, right? And we understand he went through that whole ordeal. One situation that he was in, and again, I'm not here to condone about, let's say you had this dog empire or you was doing what you was doing. He was a certain age at that time. Again, it could have been family members who were running it. Maybe he funded it, right? Maybe it was on his premise of, you know, property he owned. So he's take more of the blunt of it. But why did they go all out to make sure to posterize this man? Because he was threatening what a lot of people did not see and understand. He threatened the quarterback position. If Mike Vick does not get interrupted, what happens? What kind of quarterbacks would you see today? You remember they had Tim Tebow try to kind of, he ain't, you know, but that's like the white hype version, right? That's the white hype version. But Mike Vick was going to, you know, stir up such a, let's say, plant some seeds that you want to see something that we're going to take what he did to another level. Now, where do they play it? It's kind of like NBA with all this damn shooting. A lot of y'all may not like what I'm going to say, but a lot of this damn shooting is allowing for other people to get in the game, because when the game was more about skills, handles, speed, hops, that's going to eradicate certain types of people. But if we start this now, everybody can pull up. Now you done opened the gate all open again. So they had to do that, right? Because some people were getting a little bit tired of seeing the people who don't look like them, but they're cheering for them because they represent their team, right? So again, he's doing this because he's under a hot mic. He's been through the situation. Maybe he's saying this because he really believes it. Or is it because he had no choice? So here's another part to this, and we move on.
People were whispering in your ear that you needed to change your appearance when you were, and you wouldn't hear them at that time?
I didn't listen until the end, until I was going through the turmoil and the hardships, and it was very difficult. And then I started to see what was most important, and that was, cleaning up, changing my image, not just for public perception, but for the judge and what everything that I was, about to, get involved in. So, it was a difficult process, and it was one that I didn't like, but it was one that I had to accept.
Right? See, all about you. See, think about that. There's a lot of people who are black who always have a disdain. When black people advocate for black people, they say you only doing but crying. You're using as excuse. There's no racism. They say all this, and then you'll see a situation like this where Mike Vick is based on the fact he has to stay in compliance because he's trying to work his way back in, and he may not agree with the stuff he's saying, but based on the fact he had to, being compromised, right? Being compromised. And that's the thing that a lot of them have to understand when they take these positions and get into these status and get elevated to this status of stars, then you become more corporate. And you can't go against that. So that's why you see some of the things that's going on with LeBron. But he keeps saying he needs to do it a different way. What other way can you be but yourself? I'm not coming in there and trying to say that somebody probably become a yo. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that in your natural element as a black person, whether you speak the Queen's English in an articulate manner, or you have a stutter, or you have a lisp, does that define you as the entirety of a person? Or is it that you have to be so well polished so that you can sell these products, and we don't want you to have this image, this black image? Can you do something about that image? Right? That's basically what they ask you. Can you do something about that black image? It's a little too black for us, right? So that's what ended up happening. So here's Mike Vick telling Colin Kaepernick, man, you need to, do a different way. Don't do it that way. Don't look like that. Clean cut yourself. Cut all your hair off. Clean cut. Put on a suit. You understand? What subliminal is he really saying? And a lot of us don't catch that. A lot of us think, well, that's what he's supposed to do. He's making all these millions of dollars, and that's. Yeah, but one thing is, how come you never see on the other spectrum, on the other side of that, how come you don't see them doing that to them? How come it's just now they could come in, the hair, mohawk, all that? Ain't no complaint about that. Tattoo, all over face. I ain't seen a black man yet in sports do that. But I've seen some white men in sport tear it all up, where you can't even recognize their damn face. But there ain't no problem. But you need to be in compliance at all times, at all when. And here it is, they had him come out there and do this. Now, the last part here, and then we're going to move on. One more.
If you look at yourself now, you look at Michael Vick back when he came in, compared to what you've been through and where you are now, what would you say to that kid?
My decision making is different, and that's the part that I always wanted to work on in terms of bettering myself as a person. I knew at the end of the day, I can go 23 hours out the day and make all the right decisions, and then in the last hour, I can screw it up. And those are things that, as a young guy, you don't get, you don't understand. And in reference to Zeke and his situation, I love the kid so much, and I appreciate what he do for the game of football. And I don't want to see him to continue to go through this. That's why I say he may need a life coach, somebody to be there on call to help him, not have to go through these situations that's going to be detrimental to his career.
Okay? So again, represent yourself and that image. You have to make decisions and not make no mistakes. You can't be human. You have to be beyond perfect. But other people have leeways where they're finding ways where either they don't even be in total compliance with the law, maybe not even just them, the people who associated don't be in compliance with the law, and yet the system will still find a way and they'll walk away like ain't nothing, that none of that stuff happened, right? We done seen that recently in some of these cases, right? And so, again, I'm not bad here to badmouth Vic or anything. I understand his situation he had to deal with, but that's what happened when you become the bad man seed that could be planting something that would be detriment in the eyes of those who are running things. You become non-compliant, and they're going to keep prodding and poking. That's why when you look at Allen Iverson, it was the same way, right? He was too much of that image that they did not like, and they wanted to change it. Matter of fact, they changed the rules and made it where they couldn't even look the way they did. Because matter of fact, if you go back what Mike Vick was talking about, he was looking like hip hop. Well, hip hop is good enough to sell, to make millions for people who got these businesses, but it ain't good to be the image for this corporation. But then why would they be against those people who are trying to make that to be a societal, or let's say part of what they call it, the culture, right? Now I'm talking about the culture. Well, if these people are coming up out of these cultures, then what's acceptable to make records or sell videos and merchandise with these images, and the music being, let's say, given a right by the FCC to play so that they can hear it, then what you expect the kind of images you're going to see. We understand as a corporation in the business, you have the right to have your employees look, dress, and be a certain way. But if you're getting your talent from these environments, then you're telling them that the environments that they're coming are wrong, then why is it okay for them to make business and sell this? And yet those who are the movers and shakers don't see that as part of the standard of civilization. Then why is this able to fester and become profitable and marketable, and matter of fact, globalized it? You understand? So anyway, that's that story there. I just want to bring a little bit more attention to it, because everybody seemed to just kind of not understand, in the way I'm looking at it, the totality of the real part dealing with that situation. So now I'm going to go into, for those who didn't hear, you remember in 2014 how we talked about the Detroit water and the crisis they say, and how people got the contaminated river water. Well, they kind of snuck up onto everybody that's either paying attention or really don't care. But we as Black WeUpReport, we see those things. We are on the watchtower. We see these things, and we just want to bring some honorable mention to it for those who didn't know or didn't hear about it. Well, here is that in particular. Let's get into that and be right back. Check this out. Be right back. All right, so we're going to start with, as the thumbnail showed you, as you might have clicked on, due to it, 26.25 million settlement, some survivors Flint. We said that again, 626.25 million settlement, some survivors Flint. Now, this show here is going to be based on this that I seen in the article that just came out. Talks about why the 626.25 million settlement may not be enough for survivors of Flint water crisis. Let me say that again. Why the 626.25 million settlement may not be enough for survivors of Flint water crisis. Now, some of y'all may not have heard that they had just came out recently showing a settlement that according to this article, they want to talk about how this was considered to be a historic moment. It was the state of Michigan or Detroit trying to make some headways based on the issue that's been going back at least from 2014 to now, 7 years. And let me try to give you some insight as to how they kind of, they put this out here, but there's a lot been going on, so a lot of people may not have heard of it. And I thought it was a little interesting, and then just look at this, how they laid this out. So they talk about how last month, how the federal judge approved a partial settlement. Now, this is partial. $626.25 million is partial settlement. Now, look how they did this. Now, this is supposed to be for compensating as many as they say 85,000 residents. Let me say that again. Got a partial settlement of $626.25 million, and that's going to compensate as many as 85,000 residents. So 85,000 would be, I guess, the max, as many. Now, according to this, compensation is coming from the problems caused by what they say the water crisis, called the water crisis. But even when you look at this money, how it's going to be supposedly given out to the Flint residents due to the health and safety issues related to what had took place, as we get more into this story, we'll talk about how this water crisis and how it continues to persist in the majority Black communities. Now, these are the things that we need to look at. But one thing I want to talk about off the bat is the fact of $626.25 million sounds like a lot of money for some people. But when you think about doing the math and saying that the max of people who could be compensated are 85,000. So if you do the math, I want you to do the math now. When you do the math, you know what you're going to come up with, a sum total that each person would get. If you say if 85,000 claimants are going to be compensated for this money, or 85,000 residents, you know what per person would get? And this is why I wanted to talk about this, because just look at this. Let's look at this amount that they're about to give. You know what per person would get if all 85,000 residents got this money, part of this $626,025,000? About $7,368. Let me say that again. Each claimant, if they was to break this money and divide it by 85,000 people, $626,000.25 million, or $626,250,000, they get about $7,368 per person. Now we got to look at the fact of how, when you talk about lead, health issues that come with it, the long prolonged, and the things that will fruition as time go on. And can $7,000 actually resolve the issue? Now, this is all exposed from lead from the tap water. And some of the things that they talked about that had been revealed, they talked about illnesses like Legionnaire's disease. I had a friend some years back, man, I think he's been gone almost 30 years now. He died from Legionnaire's disease, right? And that ravaged the body rapidly in no periods of time. They talked about people having miscarriages due to this tap water. They talked about how the behavioral problems in children. And then they also talking about how male infertility has happened or is happening. So when we look at this story and just think about the simple fact of just say tap water, and that this story and how it's going to lay out about how that how this tap water that was contaminated got amongst this community of people, and these causes now of illnesses and these body dysfunctions and things that are creating behaviors. And we have to look at it as a community, as a group of a nation of people, and ask ourselves, is this an isolated incident? Is it only just here that has happened? Or is there something unannounced, unbeknownst to many of us, that is just out here that is going on? Right? So that's what we report, that's what we do. Now, according to, they talk about the preliminary terms of this settlement, the way they're going to allocate this money, they're going to break this money. Now, remember, I had just told you, if they took the $626.25 million and divided it according to, they say, 85,000 of the residents who were part to be compensated. But listen to how they said in this article how they were going to divvy up the money. Now, they're talking about 80% of the funds will be distributed to those who were of the time of 6 and younger. So going back to 2014, they were 6 years old or younger, 80% of that money would be going to those children. So what is 80% of $626.25 million? You might be asking, Mr. Blows Your Mind. Well, it's $501,024,000. So right there, of the bigger allotment or the bigger portion of this money, 80% will be going to those children. Now, again, I don't know of the 85,000 residents, how many of them are children, how many of them are adults, how many of them are teens, how many of them are women, right? But according to what this article says, 80% of these funds will be distributed to those who are 6 or younger. Okay? And those of the time that, again, exposure to the Flint River water. Right? So I guess you have to somehow be tested to see if it's Flint River water, not if it was just the Flint system in itself, but exposure to the Flint River water. Okay? Could that be some people who might have been affected and not knowing prior to that there may have been issues prior to this? We're going to look at other places that are talking about in this article as well, who may have been showing some kind of, let's say, we'll go reach there when we get there. So again, they talk about 80% of that money will be allocated to 6 and younger. 2% of this funds will be distributed to special education services, right? So what's 2% of $626.25 million? This is, let's say 2% would be about $12,525,600. About almost $12.5 million of the $626 million will be going to special education service. And they talk about these services in Genesee County. Then they talked about 18%. Now check this out. They say 18%, right, will be for property damage. 18% for property damage. Really? Okay, well, how much is 18%, Mr. Blow Your Mind? Well, if 18% of the total number, we say $626.25 million, will be about $112,730,400. That would be that. So my thing is, this money is being allocated to property damage as well. So we're looking at who are really benefiting from some of this money, right? When we look at this, we're looking at, okay, they got the bigger portion going to the children, right? But then special education services is getting money. And then they're talking about how that those who have property damage will receive some money. Then they say 1% will also go towards businesses who suffer financial deprivation. Let me say that again. 80% will go to the children from 6 and under that can prove that they were part of the Flint River that caused their problems. 2%, 2% go to where again? What did they say 2% was going? Where the 2% going? You know where 2% was going, right? And remember, the 2% is getting 12,525,600, which is to special, let's say special services, right? Those would be things that if the children are having some kind of special ed disabilities. So they're already allocating 12.5 million to them. Then they said that 18% will go to property damage, right? And then the other 1% will go to businesses. So businesses, property, and special services is getting a nice chunk of the money, which if I was to total that, it was about 131 million of the 626. And then the stipulation to it is also about the amount that each person receives will be determined until all claims are submitted and found eligible. So no money, right? Now, does that mean that those are special services don't get their money? Does that mean that the people who own property, who can claim on damage, have they getting their money? And what about the what was the other one? The other one was for special ed, right? Special ed, property, and businesses. Will they get their money first? Will they have to go through to be determined to be submitting their claim and found eligible? They say accordingly all claims. Okay? So how long will that take for all this money? Now, again, this just came out. So let's look at some more how this is going. Now, they talked about organizations like Black Millennials for Flint and how they were helping out to endure the crisis during the time. And they were launching a number of initiatives starting for 2022 for a lot of the residents who became vulnerable. So the group founder named Latricia Adams, she was quoted as saying that the government settlement is insufficient to support long-term care for those who continue to struggle with health problems. Let me say that again. The organization, Black Millennials for Flint, who were an organization who was helping the city to endure the crisis, they set out their itinerary for launching the initiatives for 2022, and they want to provide more help for those who are vulnerable residents. And the leader, the group founder for the Blacks for Millennia, named Latricia Adams, was quoted saying that the government settlement is insufficient. Is $626.25 million sufficient for the cause and effects, the long prolonged cause and effects that will continue, and the unknown effects that will persist even afterwards? Do you believe that $626.25 million is enough money? Because Latrice Adams believes it is insufficient. He believes also that the long-term care and the struggles and the continued struggles that will happen with those who will end up having these health problems. She believed this is a slap in the face. And she said with this settlement, it didn't take into consideration about public health, the social determinants of health. She believed that there should have been Medicaid access, Medicare access. And for those who are the remainder people who live in Flint, and the fact that a lot of these things that once you catch will be irreversible. And these are the things that have been done to those people who reside in Flint. Now, that press secretary for the Michigan Attorney General, Lindsay, I think her name is Mukomo, and they were talking about that the lawsuit involving non-settling defendants may lead to additional funds being distributed. Now, again, remember they said in the beginning talking about partial, right? So they left that door open for those who have not filed lawsuits, I guess, as a joint or what they call that, a class action suit, and it looks like the class action suit had more support because it looked like businesses, business, and those who had, let's say, real estate got involved, and I guess that gave the crux to push forward. And special ed is involved in that, so I guess that helped to fruition that more. But then there's the people who are not part of that. So with the children being at 626.25, and they're going to get 500 million of this, then that means that they're going to be the adults. Will the adults get what would be needed? Because a lot of people will focus on the fact that children, the development, and as I go on, I'll talk about more about some of the things that lead causes. But what about these adults that will be afflicted? Because as you get older, you get weaker, can get weaker. But these things that may be the cause and effects that may, bring on some kind of illness. And what kind of care do you get for that? Or is it a one and done and, make the best of the situation? Hey, you sitting here watching the video. Why you sitting there? Put your hand on that like button, click it, thumbs it up, share this video, comment. You can like or dislike it. We don't care about that. And also, if you ain't over here and subscribe, what you waiting on? Get yourself on there and subscribe to get on up to WeUpReport so you can stay up, because we going to keep you up. That's how you help keep this channel going. You can also do some monetary donations. We'll tell you about that later. But right now, wake yourself up, like, share, and comment. And don't forget, when you subscribe on that button, hit that put all notifications. You know how YouTube get down.
Clean drinking water, a natural resource we often take for granted near the Great Lakes. But Moses West knows a water crisis is quietly growing.
Everybody knows we're running out of water.
A problem the retired ranger spent the past 4 years working to eliminate.
All the water that we need it exists right here in the air.
He believed so strongly in that idea. In 2015, West invented an atmospheric water generator, or AWG, a machine that takes in air and turns it into drinking water.
We're at the place now, I think, making 50, 100, 200, 250,000, a million gallons of water at an incredibly low energy consumption. I think cheaper than groundwater by far. Cheaper than desalination.
So far, 12 of these AWGs exist. West planted them in 3 areas, including the Bahamas, Puerto Rico, and Flint, Michigan.
I need to engage with the people here, and I need to show them what this machine does, and they need to understand that it is their machine, and I am here for them.
West says his AWGs are federally approved, and the water quality is also tested by the Colorado Water Authority.
It's clean. It's good enough to drink. No bacteria or anything in it. And the reason that we goes through the filtration process, so as soon as you turn it on, it starts making water.
You may be wondering how these atmospheric generators are tied to Wisconsin.
Most of West AWGs were manufactured right here in Manitowoc.
And the people of Manitowoc should be proud. Just 1 unit provides a city with hundreds of gallons of clean water. The best part, it doesn't cost residents a penny. West works with organizations like the Water Rescue Foundation to cover the cost. So far, the response in the community has exceeded his expectations.
And they were very happy that somebody actually cared enough for them to come to jump over the bureaucracy, come to a private piece of land and do this thing.
Right now, his priority is planting these AWGs in Flint, helping our neighbors here in the Midwest. In Manitowoc, Michelle London, Spectrum News.
That's how we invested in community colleges and land-grant colleges like Michigan State. We invest. Can I get some water? Come on up here. Give me some water. I want a glass of water. I want a glass of water. Sit down. Where do we go from here? Well, I'm still waiting for my water. Somebody obviously didn't hear me. Hold on a second. Now, the reason I know I'm okay is because I already had some Flint water. There we go. Thank you. I really did need a glass of water. This is not a stunt. Now, I'm going to talk about this. Everybody settle down. This is a feisty crowd.
Drain fuel. They added something to the coolant lines. They played with electronics. And that's not typical vandal stuff.
Less than a week after bringing free water to Flint, Moses West says the green machine he designed to do just that was vandalized.
Once they broke into the machine and they destroyed the generator, very technical. They knew what they were doing. It wasn't just, random vandalism, not at all. They destroyed the battery. They put metal in the fuel system. I saw that when I was cleaning the fuel filter.
West is a military veteran who travels across the country to areas in crisis, bringing a machine he designed like this one that literally makes fresh water out of thin air. He put the green machine out for people along Saginaw Street on Thursday and was hoping to make a big impact. He says before the vandalism, they were giving hundreds of people free water every day.
You got to look at, I'm making anywhere from 1,200 to 2,000 gallons of water a day. And giving away for free. That's a lot of money out of somebody's pocket someplace.
West says that he can only speculate as to why someone would try to destroy something that was just trying to help the community.
West says he hopes to have the green machine back open and working again soon, with some anti-vandalism features added as well.
All right, so yeah, that was, again, give you a little rendition of some of the things that was associated. As the brother in here, Tony Smith said, well, didn't they vandalize this machine or his machine? And as I showed you, according to the news report, somebody did not want them to have fresh water, right? And this is really a year after the fact. When you think about 2014 is when they came up with or brought attention to everybody about the Flint, Michigan. And that brother there had created the machines and was ready to go and presented it in 2015. So for them now at 2021 to now come and have a settlement of a partial settlement. And as I'm reading about this, you're seeing how they're allocating the money. 80% sounds like a lot of money when you're talking about $26.25 million, when $500 million of that is allocated, but there's a number of 85,000 people who will be, they cut this money up. I don't know if that's all 85,000 children, but, those who might have seen the earlier part of the show where I was talking about Mike Vick, and when we look at the Flint, Michigan, Mike Vick being a seed planter to let's say, inspire young people. And we have crises that I'm going to show you, not just in Flint, but there's something that has been going on throughout this country. And according to what they say in these articles, it's primarily in the areas where we live at. And I know this is not the kind of news that a lot of people that do in the corner. We report, we do things that we think is beneficial, that we should be knowing. We're not on into the celebrity news. We're not into all the news that is just the rhetoric and the trend. We want the things that, again, we need to be watchers and understand how somebody who's playing chess and doing things that may not, at the time we see it, may not know, but you can't say you did not know. So let me give you a little bit more on that story of Flint. So here's the other parts to that. Some people may think that's all you need to do. And so they said that they recognize that no amount of money will undo the harms created by this crisis, and that the hardship that continues for this city. They want to encourage to see that more than half of Flint's population registered for the settlement, which was negotiated. Now keep that in mind. They said which was negotiated, meaning you agreed to this, right? $626.25 million was agreed upon by those. Now, we don't know who represented. We don't know who were the mouthpieces and who said 626 was enough. But accordingly, they said they were tenaciously doing this negotiation for about 18 months, and they said they reached a historic outcome. Now, see, reaching the outcome was going to come anyway. To say historic by trying to put a $626.25 price tag on there, when you have 85,000 potentials, right? And then you break that 85,000 and then you say, well, those children between 6 and under at that particular time and getting the king share of 80%, but then there's going to be a lot of adults as well. And again, you know, the selling point of saying that we resolving this issue, we come to a meeting of the minds and they negotiated and they okay with the settlement that they came with. But under the circumstance and the possibilities of things that were already fruitioning and people being sick and needing some kind of assistance, you know, if a starving person is hungry and somebody come by with a cracker, I'm pretty sure, as much as they may not say, well, the cracker not going to fill me up, but the cracker is better than nothing, a lot of people will take that cracker, right? Instead of saying, well, I'm going to wait till something else better comes. Now, when you look at since the crisis, they call crisis, that began in 2014, they talk about how not just the communities in Flint, Michigan, that were exposed to lead, they talked about across the country. They talk about places like Memphis, Tennessee. They talk about Washington, D.C. They talk about Memphis, right? Well, did I say Memphis already? Okay, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Memphis, right? And they were talking about how these were also in disasters at the peak of the time that Flint was going through it, right? So some of us may not know about none of that. But let me tell you a little something about some of these other places, because there may be something going on here that we have not noticed. And I think it's kind of, you know, part of black media for us to stay on top of certain situations, especially when it looks like there's a possibility there might be something that is going to afflict our children and have been afflicting our children, but maybe we have not been noticing collectively. So when you think about science and how they say they verify that children with elevated blood lead levels, it's claimed that they are going to be at greater risk for learning disabilities, right? They're going to have a decrease in their IQ, speech development delays, attention attention deficit disorder, aggressive behaviors that diminish their educational achievements and change their life trajectory. Right? Let's say that one more again. Science has verified that children with elevated blood lead levels are at greater risk for learning disabilities, decreased IQs, speech development delays, attention deficit disorder, aggressive behaviors, educational achievements, and there's going to be a change in their life trajectory, right? So think about that. There's a lot of things. If somebody young who gets diagnosed with having lead in their system, that is going to be a debilitating effect that is going to prohibit them from reaching the potential of their existence. Now, could that whole ordeal been an accident? Well, according to what I have read, and I'll get into more, I'll tell you how Flint got in that situation according to what they wrote. Okay, for those who may not know. Now, when you look in Memphis, remember Memphis is one of the, they said that was also enduring with lead or water crisis. They talk about there's about 400,000 homes in Memphis that were built before 1950 and have the highest risk of lead hazards, right? Because they talk about, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's any houses built before I think it's 78, had a the high probability of having lead paint, and lead pipes. Paint might be with lead and so forth and so on. But they even talk about these homes, and there's 400,000 in Memphis that was built before 1950, and they claim these have the highest risk of lead hazards. Okay, we're not even talking about the ones that were from 60s and the 70s and almost to the 80s, right? So Memphis is having this. So they talk about how the neighborhoods would have the high concentration of lead in the homes. Often are also, they're burdened by chronic undeveloped or uninvestments in housing. Let me say that again. Neighborhoods with high concentration of lead in the homes often are also burdened by chronic underinvestments in housing. Right? Again, if you know anything about real estate, blighted property, right? These areas that are slums or considered or in that red area, no matter how much money you invest, the property value will not go up. And so the cause and effect of other people knowing about the burdens of these areas, why would you invest in these areas? And so these high property, what they call high poverty rates, high energy burdens, and lack of access to employment and educational resources, right? In Memphis in particular, and they say across the country, lead poisoning is a major contributor to poor school performance. Let me say that again. Or to them, lead poisoning is a major contributor to poor school performance, violent crimes, diminished lifetime earnings, and poor health outcome. So there's a lot of people I've seen recently talk about, especially after you heard about the young Dolph killing, and they talk about how Memphis and it's just basically like a pull-up state, right? Everybody get it in. Could also this have the effect, because a lot of times people will talk in the contributing factor could be hip-hop music, drugs, right? Poverty. But how much of that is equated to the lead that drinking a glass of water, unbeknownst to you as a child and unbeknownst to the parent who does not understand or have no knowledge about buildings and lead pipes and paint and never had nobody come there and test it. That the long years of living in these areas and being lead-based and having lead in your body, well, people try to equate and say that black people have low IQs, right, are violent people, and just have a lot of behavior problems. Is it due to the simple fact of this lead that has been permeating throughout our communities? Has this been a silent attack that we had not known about, or known, but because of the economics it would cost to, let's say, resolve these issues, that it was not worth to put into these areas? So it talked about that the development director named Paul Young, and he talked about how the city of Memphis received a $5.6 million from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in 2019. And this money was supposed to help to eliminate lead hazards in homes built before 1978. Now remember, there was 400,000 homes in Memphis that was built before 1950. Now you have $5.6 million that was given by the Urban Development, right? Which is really much you say is HUB, right? Which was the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in 2019. And so when you think about $5 million or $5.6 million, and let's just say if we just gave each person that owned the 400,000 that you know homes that were built before 1950, and if you was to allocate that money to that, you know would only get about $14. Each person would only get $14 if you distribute the money of the 400,000 that they talked about of homes built in 1950. So now if you include now 28 more years on top of those from 1950 to 1978, if they get 14, basically now nobody's getting no money. So you're not eradicating anything. So sometimes when they're making these articles and they're talking about how they're giving money, some of us are going to have to do the math and look at it and say, hey, wait a minute, there ain't no money to do nothing, but it looks good in print. It gets the politician to say that they allocated, they've done something. They get to mention it, right? But in applicable practice, this can't do anything, right? So they talk about how this federal investment presents an opportunity to leverage HUD dollars. What investment? Right? What really investment? To be able to put in print that you gave $5.6 million? See, this is how we have to learn how they play the game and how really when allocations of money from government never gets into our hands, really never no trickle down that we really going to benefit. This is why there's so much advocacy about trying to get money and activism and wondering why people from other places are getting money. Matter of fact, remember they talked about in Baltimore. Now that's Memphis. Now, when they talk about Baltimore, they're talking about, you ever heard of a chemical called Forever Chemical? They call it Forever Chemical, what they call it the PFAS, right? PFAS stands for polyfluoroalkyl substance. Let me say that one more again. PFAS stands for polyfluoroalkyl substance, which is another name for Forever Chemicals, right? And this Forever Chemical cannot be broken down. Actually cannot be excreted out of the body once you get it. And let me show you that they're talking about the fact that they're saying that forever chemicals are widespread in the U.S. drinking water. Widespread in the drinking water here in the United States, right? Well, there's an issue going on in these things that they're talking about what these PFS are and how they get into the water. And it seems to be a pattern of where they are highly concentrated at. And according to some research I've seen, they say there haven't been any new chemicals added to the list of regulated drinking water for contaminants going back since 2000. So they haven't updated the list, which means other contaminants that might be in the water may be detrimental in health, but have not been put on the list as a contaminant. So it's legal. And so those who remember the movie 3 the Hard Way with Jim Kelly, it was Jim Kelly, Fred Williamson, and the other one was Jim Brown. Oh, I can't think of his name. I know the brother. It come my name. You might, if you know, put it in there because it may come to me. But the Hard Way was about them contaminating the water. Remember that? Contaminating the water. And it had a kind of a nefarious supremacy movement to contaminate, and they were talking about all the major cities. Well, was that movie foretelling something, or is it by chance that has happened? See? So anyway, when they talk about Washington, D.C., they talk about how they discovered in 2001, they said monochloramine. Let me say that again. In 2001 in DC, they talk about monochloramine, right? How they discovered that. And that they said that this monochloramine is 83 times higher, right, in lead that they found after they determined that it was there. Now, the thing that I had read about this was talking about the changes came from chlorine to chloramine, right? So they used chlorine, and then when they start using the chloramine, it went up. And it started to, they was using this as a way to treat chemicals. And then what ended up happening, they seen that it caused a spike. So it started causing a spike. And so that's kind of crazy when you look at this, because it's like, okay, something that you use to be a chemical to purify end up creating a worse contaminant. So these things that are happening and some of the patterns that it's showing that we as black people need to be concerned is that it will affect and have prolonged life changing effects, that when we talk about children are the future and your children are being defect or having an effect that they cannot have a future, what does it do collectively to a nation? These are the things when you talk about spiritual fighting that you do not discern, because a spiritual warfare is things that cannot be detected by the carnal eye. So somebody is fighting you in a spiritual way that you do not see. So water, in this case here, I've seen this here. It talks about for far too long, families across America, especially those in undeserved communities, have suffered from PFAS in their water, their air, and the land their children play on. Let me say that again. For far too long, families across America, especially those in undeserved communities, have suffered from PFAS in their water, their air, and on their land that children play by the EPA administrator said, right? Now, these aren't my words. These are the things that they put out there, right? And sometimes we are nonchalantly not paying attention because, again, your air. How can somebody contaminate the air? What is in your air that may not be in other airs? Some people talk about chemtrails. Some people talk about maybe it's in the exhaust coming out of cars. It could be the tar that they're using, right? Again, we see that some of the dwellings that we live in that are built before 78, in itself is kind of like lead, radioactive, if you want to say. The whole communities are radioactive, and then the environments that we live in. So have somebody stealthily, clandestinely been using our own environment against us, unbeknownst to us. Many of us that have been around sometimes gotten to the point where we won't even drink out the tap water. So it becomes now, it's like what they say, chic, or it's in to have bottled water. But then the brother that was a scientist named, I forgot his name, Tyrone, that was talking about how atrazine was put in the water. And in that atrazine, the science of it was that they had was frogs, and those frogs that was in this atrazine water began to have same-sex tendencies. started to fruition the same-sex tendencies, right? We've been wondering, I've seen some of the women that here on the black corner of YouTube when they're talking about the femininity of men today. And maybe when we talk about all of these things collectively, maybe they all have a sum total of somebody's design, right? Maybe that could be it, right? So that's what they're talking about in that. And let's go back to with the Flint part. And let's go back into this Flint part here. Because that was just talking about other places around the country. And I'm pretty sure most of the major cities that many of us live in, if they were to do these kind of tests and compare to other communities and other ethnicities, there may be traces, but it may not be as high. I think a lot of the areas that we come out of, what we call the hoods, the communities, and so forth, a lot of them are dumping grounds for a lot of toxics and experiments. It's like when we talk about the juices. Remember the 10-cent juices you used to get back in the day? It's just juice. Had a little 10-4 top, right? We drank them, right? You get the hot chips, right? But it be saturated with the red in there. I remember at one time going back in the 70s, I think they were talking about how they took away the red, the number 7 red, I think it was, right? Because it came to have a cancer in there. Where those who remember when the M&M had a red in it, and they took the red out for a while because they come to find out that the chemical or the product they were using to create the red was causing a cancer. And they took it off and then they came back later on. But so now when those of us who live in the hoods, and you know these Doritos you buying, I mean, you notice how when they talk about hot, they be soaked in these hot Cheeto, flaming hot Cheeto. Now they got it with this extremely, so, you know, some of us, I mean, we're a little bit more health conscious. Some of us is vegan and so forth, but some of us still have the same old diets that we've always had. And sometimes we splurge and we eat these things, but have you noticed that the saturation of this stuff, and we don't have our own laboratories to really do the thorough research to find out what could be, but, you know, Layla Africa, rest in peace, rest in power, he talked about how the spiritual war and fighting about, you know, on your plate and what you eat and what you drinking, right? And so let's look at, again, as they were talking about how, again, they're going to distribute this money and how they took about 18 months they got this done, and talk about how these different places around the country and how they also, so going back to the Flint crisis, if that's what you want to call it, a crisis, they said that it goes back to when the state governor at the time was Rick Snyder. And so based on the fact they were trying to reduce spending in what they say a cash-strapped city, they wanted to switch the main water source from Detroit's water to a sewage to the Flint River via a pipeline from the, what they call the Caregnandi Water Authority. Let me say that again. The whole Flint crisis is stemmed from a drive that they say by the state's governor at the time named Rick Snyder. Now, again, he wanted to reduce the spending in a cash-strapped city, according to what they say, and that it came to the decision to switch the main water source, which was from the Detroit water and sewage, to the Flint River through a pipeline from the Caregnandi Water Authority. Right? So they knew Flint River. River. Now, I understand they have filtration, water reclamation centers and stuff like that, but Flint River and how we can see that this decision to switch this is fatal, that many people will be affected, and primarily it is in black communities. According to some of the things I read, it was talking about a price tag of how much it was of the save of doing this maneuver, right? About $5 million. So let's look at the $5 million they was trying to save for a cash-strapped city to now having a price tag, as you see on your screen, $626.25 million. So what was the investment here, right? Those who might understand what I'm saying, what's the investment here? $5 million that you saved that you call $626.25 million partial payment, but at the same time, how many birds are you getting with this stone? Now, according, they say when you go back and you read the reports about the proving of the water to be unsafe, now the switch was performed in 2014. Now this water was exposing residents that was filled with high-risk contaminants. Remember, this is river water, right? When you think about drinking out the river, they tell you, you have to watch out for a certain kind of, especially as a man, you get some of these things and getting your intestines, right? So I don't know how this Karangadandi, Karagnandi, I think, and having this and how much they accounted attributed for, well, I don't know, but anyway. So they said based on that decision that was made in 2014, the results was years of health issues for black residents paired with the failed promise of a boost economy. I don't know how switching that water and a promise of a boost economy, I don't know how those two went hand in hand, but of course that's what they were talking about. Okay? And so talk about the history of how Detroit was once a strong industrial city, and then how it went into decline in the 60s, right? Remember Motor City, and how all those reliable factories was there. A lot of people will talk about that time and wonder how when you talk about black people, and how when you go back and look at the reports and see from the 50s, 60s, going into the 70s, black people were doing very well. And all of a sudden, you had Vietnam War, right? As they're talking about with the Flint situation, which a lot of them were living in Detroit, and just factories in general, a lot of those factories started leaving the United States, going to third world countries to get cheaper labor, and then you were taking the economic base that so many black people at that particular time could take care of their families. And Flint was one of those cities that was one that really benefited from it. So when you actually see there's videos of individuals who show Detroit and you see the detriment in Detroit, you see abandoned homes and just like ghost out town based on what had happened by pulling those factories, and not just there, all across. Many of us who were of these ages remember how we worked in factories. Factories was abundance. We didn't have this, dog eat dog trying to get employment, is because there was always a factory you could go into. You didn't have to have the high education. Matter of fact, you really think about it up until about the mid 80s, it used to be entry level, when you could just go on the job and they kind of let you work as you come in. And then that slowly dissipated where the factories were no longer here. So now, then the technology comes in, and as 90s and so forth come in. So now you have like Gen X, right? Then you got Gen Y, or millennials, I guess. Oh no, Gen Y. And they're kind of transitional as well. They still had some of that old school going into the transition of technology. So you have really out here baby boomers, Gen X, who are from a school where, using your hands, being able to, use your hands for labor, they were part of that generation. So when those factories left, it hurt a lot of, again, the foundation where a lot of black people were relying on that one job that could take and be suffice enough for a family. And once you did that, and then start bringing in more of immigration to replace, see how that trickle effect has happened. When you look at Flint, claim is 54% black. Nearly 39% of all residents that live there in Flint, they consider live under poverty. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, it said that that's what it is. 39% of the 54% who are black, 39% live in poverty. So when you look at this water crisis, as they say, it exasperated the city's economic decline. And so when they go back and they look at the, how this economic decline and how it exasperated, they talk about a man named a director for the Center of Urban Studies at the University of Buffalo in Architecture and Planning. He has stated this, what he said. He talking about for decades of neglect and underdevelopment in Flint, challenge that we face with African American communities across the country. Decades of neglect and underdevelopment in Flint is a challenge that we face with African American communities across the country. Not just Flint. No matter where black Americans live, it has been the SOS, the same old shit. But everybody just wants to believe that we all have the same existence. That what happened with you happened to all of us, but not at the same detriment. Right? Not putting your toxic waste, not burying your garbage, not living in lead-based, lead-filtered parks, dwellings, schools, drinking the water, having poor diets. But that's all a contributing factor that deals only with black Americans because it said it's your choice. So when you look at Flint in itself, the median household income in Flint was $28,834 in 2019. When you look and compare that to the national median of $69,560, almost twice. It is twice. Twice and some, right? So that's what we're talking about, a household of 28,000. But no, there's no need to repair none of this, right? We're just going to put this Band-Aid over this issue here. Down the line is going to be an even, bigger catastrophe. Now, according to what they said, that the state has spent about $423 million to help Flint recover from the crisis. Now, that's $423 million. I don't know what they've done as into maybe, I don't know if it was the water or not. Maybe with that 423 on top of that 626, that's about $1 billion, right? About $1 billion, right? So they spent about $1 billion. And they said they included about 97 million settlements passed in March to replace all the city's lead service lines. See, they got money again. Okay, nothing wrong with replacing the city's lead service lines that were contaminated its water system. Nothing wrong with putting that money. The people. Why do people have a hard time giving black people money? Why is it that nobody wants black people to have any money? He wants you to suffer silently. Really, in this case, you won't suffer silently. You'll go out painfully. But you got money, I think it was Tupac, you got money for war, but you can't feed the poor. They think about how the money needs to be invested and recirculated more consciously into the communities. You're never going to do that. I mean, all this stuff is just, paper tiger and just rhetoric. No one's really trying to resolve these issues. because it has its real intent. So they also talked about there's never been a moment in American history when black people have not lived in undeveloped neighborhoods. I'm going to say that again. There's never been a moment in American history when black people have not lived in undeveloped neighborhoods like Flint. They say you got to change the neighborhoods in order to change the other outcomes. Changing the neighborhood may help, but once you displace black people, now they won't be able to afford to come back in. So when we look at this in its totality, what has happened, and then to end it and saying that you got to change the neighborhoods in order to change the other outcomes, well, we know what rejustification look like. What do you call when you do it with this kind of purpose? All right, so that's going to be it for that part, right? So I'm going to thank each and every one of y'all who are sitting in here. Glad to see y'all sitting and enjoying. Hopefully that you are already a subscriber. Share, comment, do all that good stuff. But that's what we do over here on WeUpReport. Find the things that a lot of the other shows in the corner do not talk about, the things that I deal with. Don't have to necessarily be black to hear it. But if you want to understand some of the black plight of things that you hear people talk about and you don't understand, this is one of the places that you can come to hear, because that's what we do, right? We just gonna give it to you the way it's been presented, and we're just gonna have our own, I ain't gonna say spin, we're just gonna get our own truth on it. So, as this show is ending, reason why I did the Mike Vick in the beginning, and then when you have this here being Flint, Michigan, when you look at Mike Vick, and as I articulated as into his iconicness at the time and what the potential he had and what he would have affected the head on younger that was observing him, is dealing with children. When you look at Flint and you talk about the lead and being that one that came to fruition, that became nationwide known, but as you heard in other parts of the story, it's been happening unbeknownst, under radar with the PFAS that they show, as I showed you, throughout the country. So clandestine wars, cold wars, spiritual wars, these could be accidents. But if you are avid watching this show and been watching me for I've been around for 10 years, but you wouldn't know it because I can't get 100 views, is because what am I talking about over here, right? But I did a video April 1st, 2014 that went viral. What would go in the corner over here is viral. To be 300,000 at that time. And talking about how certain people are losing their population. So if I told you 7 years ago about that, what you think people been working on clandestinely, let's say allegedly, to say that there's a possibility that some of these things may seem to be, but may not be an accident, just hypothetically speaking, right? So when you're attacking a seed maker like Mike Vick, right? They got to get them before they sprout. And if they should sprout, they have to be neutralized. They have to be what they say GMO, genetic modified, right? Before they get to their full and let's say fully materialized, right? I did a video, Jack Johnson, for those. Again, the bad man type. Mike Vick was a bad man type. Deontay Wilder was a bad man type. There's many more I could talk about. But when you have these bad man type, they have to be cut because the seeds they will plant. They're good for what they do, but as a system that may not need that type, they have to get rid of those seeds, right? And so when we're talking about the future of our children, and when people like Flint has happened, then what does the future look like with those when they come to fruition of being adults, when they lost their capacity of IQ, of mind, have to be relying on the system. So then you can keep perpetuating the nonsense of, black people, low IQs, underperforming, when the data, the articles have said that there has been something in the dwellings you live in, from the water you drink, to the food you eat, to the air you in, and then the playgrounds and so forth, that is a contributing factor. So now, with that being said, how do you eradicate that? Or who really wants to eradicate that, right? So it is incumbent on us as adults, those of the black community, and those of black media. We have to, again, cry loud, spare not. And we have to talk about certain things that might be uncomfortable to other people. So again, I want to thank each and every one of y'all for coming over here. Again, this is the most hated show in the black corner of YouTube. I'm your host, Mr. Mrblowsurmind. I see you putting in comments, but you're not saying nothing. So I guess you just some attention, right? If you're a subscriber, then fine. If you're just in here saying what you're saying, I don't know what all that's supposed to mean, but I see you, but I don't know if I'm going to give you that kind of attention. But I appreciate that. And again, to my next show, y'all. Matter of fact, 2022, we hope to be on daily, frequent, and have a specific time for those who enjoy what they see over here. Maybe not as long, but just to give you the daily news of things that I and we, or those of WeUpReport, love to hear. So again, to my next show, y'all, and to my next show.
Portions of the following program may be unsuitable for younger or more sensitive viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.